Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the digitalization of procurement and what about consulting. Before we get started, can you please confirm in the chat that you're hearing me? Okay. So the first thing I wanted to say is welcome to everyone. And I wanted to introduce you to the speakers. I will do very briefly. I'll let them be a little bit more, tell a bit more about them. And so from the left to the right, please welcome Boris Foiselle. Boris, could you introduce you shortly, please?
Yes, so hi everyone, my name is Boris Foiselle. I am a procurement product manager for Solvay, which is a specialty chemical company. I'm located in Singapore, and for the last 5 years, I am trying my best to move Solvay into the right procurement digitization path.
Thank you, Boris. Now, James, your turn.
Yeah, thank you, Helene, and pleasure to be with you today. So my name is James. I am a digital procurement subject matter expert, originally procurement professional for 16 years, and then left the corporate world to set up my own business. And I run the website called procurementsoftware.site, which is a free-to-access database of over 300 procurement technology solutions. So as you can search and find the tech that you're looking for in less time than it takes to boil an egg. And I'm currently based in Bulgaria, which is where I live most of the year. And yeah, looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you. And now, Thomas.
Yes, hi, nice to meet you. So Tomas Wiemer, I'm based in the Northeast US. I work for Juniper Networks. It's a technology company. And yes, pretty much my passion is to move from procurement to cognitive sourcing, which includes then all the new options in the world of digitalization.
Thank you. And now the other two, because we're 5 today. It's a large table round, like virtual round table. Of course, there's myself. For those of you who attend those webinars on a regular basis, I'm a consulting sourcing expert, and I'm host of those webinars. And with me, my co-founder, Laurent. Can you introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Laurent Thomas. I'm one of the co-founders of Consulting Quest with Helene. After I would say years in consulting and then years with Solvay, where indeed I worked with Boris. I joined Consulting Quest full-time last year to develop our digital platform for consulting procurement.
Okay. So that's, with no further ado, let's go to the core of this webinar. So I found this quote from Warren Buffett that I thought was pretty accurate on the fact that it's becoming now a reality and something very important for businesses to go through digital transformation. But what we will realize probably today that what we put behind digital transformation and digital procurement might not be the same. So we'll try to give you some sense of how we see what is digital procurement, and not the trendy version of it, but really what it is on the field. We'll talk about the technology landscape for digital procurement. We'll also go on to what are the key challenges and prerequisites when you are implementing a digital procurement initiative. Also talk about how the specialized solutions can bring answers to the clients. And of course, we'll finish with a little bit about the consulting category and what is available for that. So that's, the agenda. Now we'll start with the first question. And I'll turn to Thomas for that. We talk a lot about digital procurement. It's becoming trendy, but what is the reality behind it? What is exactly digital procurement?
Yeah, thank you, Helene. So I think first, what I would say is that it's to create a new work environment. is to create a work environment where you have access to a certain set of data, and that permits the strategic sourcing teams to understand their market, to understand where their spend is, to understand where the price levels are, and then from here on define their negotiation strategies. So it sounds very traditional, but actually it's not. And I think the truth behind that is that it's really to go beyond the classic source to pay, P2P, contract lifecycle management, supply onboarding, and all that. And there is, and maybe we'll talk about that later, is that there are certain new activities that are not possible anymore to do if you don't have a minimum of a digital platform. I pause here, and then I don't know how deep I should go. So.
All right, James, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's becoming a necessity now, and the companies that don't embrace it are going to get left behind very, very quickly. And what I would say is it's actually a great opportunity for mid-sized businesses to maybe leapfrog some of the larger corporates, because decision-making in corporate organizations is notoriously slow. And if you, as a mid-sized business, can, source digital procurement software in an agile way and implement it faster than some of these big cumbersome suites that are out there that some of the Fortune 500 companies are trying to implement, then you have the opportunity to leapfrog them. We live in a world now where data is the new gold. Amazon is not really an e-commerce company. Tinder is not really a dating app. At their heart, they are data companies, and procurement is sitting on all of this data. And pretty much any CPO or head of procurement is suffering from the fact that their data is garbage in most cases, because it's just coming from so many disparate sources, and it's difficult to clean. So I think this really is a massive opportunity if you leverage it and you're one of the early adopters.
Oh, so indeed there are opportunities, there are benefits, but how, let's talk about return on investment with the digital procurement and how we can sell that to the higher ups. What would be the approach that, in your opinion, Thomas, is the best in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, the main financial principles need to remain, meaning any investment has a return of investment, an ROI, which means there's always profit against cost, which is the fundamental of financials, right? So that fundamental will continue to exist. So what is important is to take the time to define what the business request really is, and where the opportunity for growth is. Is it in terms of supplier management? Is it the data that you will get? There needs to be a purpose behind that, right? Is it to better manage your suppliers? Is to go into spend areas that you haven't managed before? Or it can be also more and more procurement activities as supporting revenue growth. How do you support that growth from the sourcing aspect? So any electronic platforms, any data platforms need necessary to end up with a business case that permits to grow the revenue or the asset value of the company. When I say asset value of the company, then you have new sets of values, right? Like sustainability in the US, diversity, code of ethics, valued against audit, et cetera, protecting the company, having a better risk management. All those elements come also into play. So it's really to have a matrix that permits to list immediate growth report, maybe companies less mature on the spend management side, and then on the risk management side. And risk management can also be a value driver, because there are more and more business cases where when you try to sell something and you make that contingent of something you need to buy, a service or a product, then that means that if you take that risk away for your customer, you can probably price it in a better way. So that and I think that that's one of the fundamentals. And then I pause here is that the traditional cost management, of course, exists, but there are new value drivers that procurement and the digitalization will give in the coming years. So and that's I think the exciting part.
Okay, thank you, Boris or James. Do you want to add something to what Thomas just mentioned?
Yeah, so maybe I can add, and giving I would say the corporate view. It's true that the digital procurement is a big word. After, at the end of the day, I think it's mentioned quite a lot. Your basics need to be quite strong in order for you then to move to some more digitalization. I would say that we have a lot of technology, a lot of data, and definitely it's a bit difficult to move around, to connect them, and to get a lot of efficiency from looking at all the different topics. I would say for the, I'm talking about the corporate, where we try to move is actually more to focus on some area. I think it was mentioned that now risk management, sustainability are becoming some really hot topics where we could actually start maybe smaller pilot and POCs before thinking about the big data cloud and have all the data coming together. That maybe will take years of implementation. If you look at especially our ERP integration, so little by little. But what is fun is that there's a lot of things to do, a lot of things to improve, and I guess now there are a lot of players, small, medium, or bigger, that I guess could bring something to this all full digital procurement, and we need definitely to mix all the approach to get better.
Awesome. So that's the perfect segue to the next question, which will be about the technology landscape for digital procurement. So, James, could you give us like a picture, a snapshot of what's happening right now, and also what's in front of them in terms of how it's going to evolve and what is the future of digital procurement?
Yeah, thank you. I'd love to. I mean, it's evolved from, I mean, there are three buckets essentially. There's trying to run digital procurement natively through an ERP system, which I would argue isn't really digital procurement, but some people might sort of argue against that and try and say that it is. Then you've got what I would call the all-in-one suites, which started to come out sort of late 2000s, early 2010s, with the arrival of especially when SAP bought Ariba and Coupa came onto the market, Jagger, Ivalua, Zycus, those classic legacy suites. And there's almost a new breed of those coming on now that are built on more modern cloud technology, Raindrop perhaps being the one that immediately springs to mind as a direct competitor to some of the older ones. So their philosophy is that they try and do everything reasonably well in one place. And on the plus side, you can do a lot of core functions kind of okay with those suites, but none of them offer a particularly groundbreaking solution for any single aspect that you're trying to master. So what started to come about around about 2017 and really sort of ratcheted up when COVID hit in 2020 were what I call the best of breed solutions, which are solutions which typically do one thing or increasingly do two or three things, but they try and do those world-class or best-in-class. And what the landscape is now becoming is a very broad spectrum of those best-of-breed solutions that are built on modern technology and on open interfaces that can be then connected to each other through APIs. So it's increasingly becoming a mixed landscape where you may be running some legacy technology like a Coupa or an Ariba, but you want to now plug in some of these best of breed solutions to that base platform to be able to unlock some of the activities that these suites don't do particularly well. I think universally, none of them do spend analytics particularly well. None of them do SRM, ESG, risk management particularly well. So, it's increasingly becoming a landscape where you can plug in different solutions to a core platform to enable you to have better UX and also a more advanced capability on certain aspects that you might want to go to that extra level. I would also say that user experience and ease of implementation are becoming key as well, because again, none of these legacy platforms do that particularly well. And in today's environment where you need to see a quick ROI, going back to the previous question, nobody's got a year and a six-figure budget to throw at consultants these days to implement one of these legacy platforms unless you're a huge corporation. So that's really where I see things going. Be interesting to see now with this collapse of SVB that's happened over the past week. How will that affect VC funding, and how many of these startups that have been putting growth before sustainable profitability will go to the wall as a result of funding becoming increasingly harder. I think that's going to be one of the key things that we need to look out for over the next months and couple of years if funding gets tighter. But that's probably a whistle-stop tour of where I see the market right now.
Quick question on my end, probably for for you and for Boris, but Thomas, feel free to jump in as well. We speak a lot about the integrations and the apps communicating with each other and so on. Who is concretely doing that? Does it come out of the box? Is that external consultants that you take and that will kind of develop custom solutions to take care of this integration? How does that work in practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will caveat this answer with I'm not an IT person or I'm not a techie, but realistically, you're going to need an external partner to implement one of these bigger suites because they just require so much customization, especially if it requires an ERP integration. Whereas if you're implementing something that can be a standalone platform, if you've got an e-sourcing platform that can run completely independently and doesn't require ERP integration, and you're just buying some standalone e-auction or RFP software, you can implement that within days or weeks, and you don't need an external consultancy to do that. Likewise, if contract management system, risk management system, if you don't need it to integrate with it into an ERP or within your existing P2P suite, it can be done relatively straightforward. It really depends on what you're trying to do and how much integration and customization you need.
Yeah, so if I may intervene here, I see it a little bit differently. Not to contradict at all, but it's just a different perspective. I don't think that we have this you buy an app and everything works smoothly exist as far as I'm concerned in the world of procurement. But what we do when we evaluate the prospects is looking also at the alliance partnership that this company will have. So if you take a startup or tech company, ABC, ABC has an alliances agreement with multiple companies. And those alliances in general, they have already set up the API or connectors in order to interfere with their own data. So when you finally achieve an agreement with one of those companies and they have already those alliance partnerships truly aligned, by default, you have a larger spectrum. So I think that's one way to do it. The second way to do it is that that's what we try to do, certainly, depending on the maturity where you are. Most of the source-to-pay platform have their limitations, or they tell you where they have their own alliances and they want to guide you where to go. At the beginning, it's very useful, but more you progress, you will see that there are closed doors. So, which means then that depending on the maturity of the company, if you go into a data lake, I think the future is probably going into, you get several sources of information, the P2Ps, the ERP, the supplier database, and you go all that into a sort of data lake, and from the data lake you reconnect with an external digital company, that digital in the sense that they sell data services, to make it differently. That permits you then to have an information security in place, and through the alliance partnerships, it's like a web, you go further out. I personally think this will continue to exist for a few years until the true platforms come into play. I'm personally a little bit disappointed to see that in the world of procurement, we haven't really seen any real platform coming into play. There were some temptations, but they haven't really worked. When I call, but what I mean by a platform, it means that you join the platforms, terms and conditions are already pre-cooked, the invoice payments are already simplified, and you can do business in a safe environment without going through every single supply onboarding, every single terms and conditions, every single risk management liabilities, and so on. You just join and you're part of that membership. You can act into that. And from here on, ideally, it's probably the vision of tomorrow, is that ideally such platform will then be connected with the bank, and the bank can just settle all transactions without complicated purchase orders, three-way match and invoicing, and all that gets out of the door. I mean, at the end, that will be, I would take a crystal ball in 5-10 years. If that can be achieved, the world of procurement will completely change.
Thank you.
How does that work on your end?
Excuse me?
I was asking, I fully agree with what you just said, and sounds a bit like a marketplace at the end of the day, to have the suppliers registered, recorded, they have accepted the conditions, and then there is a connection with the bank for the payment. But very often the companies have their own requirements and master service agreements and statement of work and specific requirements, and sometimes the complexity is self-inflicted.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, when you really step back, I think most of our companies, we do the large majority of the business with 10-15% of the supplier list that you have. If you have a few thousands, you maybe have less than 100 that really matter for the core business you run. Of course, they will always have a very specific master service agreements and legal and so on. But when you take them, the large majority of, most companies call them tactical suppliers, it doesn't really matter, right? And if there is enough volume and life in that platform, you can flush all that out at once. The big deals will always be special, and that's fine. But if you can get 75% of the noise out of the system, imagine the 75% without any supply onboarding, no more three-way match, no purchase order approvals. It just happens in a safe environment. You can really drive a much better business case, I think. It will happen, but it's too soon.
All right. So I suggest we move to our next question, which is about implementation. What are the key challenges and prerequisites for implementing a successful digital procurement initiative? And I will turn to you, Boris, since you're in the middle, and you will tell us about that, and also what is the complexity and the constraints that you're facing, and assume a lot of companies are facing in such an initiative.
Yes, so I can share the challenge, because it's definitely a journey. The first thing I'm talking about, in my case, first of all, you need to check, do you have a budget? You have a stakeholder on board? Then you have to check with your cybersecurity team if solutions chosen are aligned with your policy. We can be working with them. Have the legal department that may have a look also potentially at the contract and what kind of data would be used. We have also, and I think was linked to a previous discussion, some architect that will also look in terms of which integration will be doing, and if it's actually there is no integration native. Building your own means that you will have to go for some more cyber security check and how you plan to do this kind of integration. So yeah, just to give you an example, even if you have a clear ID and a clear business case, it could literally take few weeks before it goes to a committee that will then approve or ask you for more information in order to implement. So I would say we talk about digital procurement. I think it's the general, but there's nothing agile into doing it. It's really a journey. Obviously, when you know a little bit how your company is working, and if you are really confident with a supplier chosen or the solution, and also that you have also a clear support from your CPO and his team, the journey could be a little bit easier. But at the end of the day, it's a journey. So you better have the right business case, the right budget, and the right scope in order to have it successful. If you want, on a short time. That's what I will share.
Yeah, during the preparation of the webinar, you mentioned that the context with the pandemics and the trends had given a perception of simplicity of that, but that the reality is much more complex.
Indeed. So I think we can give the example of Amazon, that you all order online whatever products. So we may think that implemented some catalog, Amazon or some others actually could be really easy, but you find out that in order to have some catalogs in your company can also take weeks, months for the same matter, even if your stakeholder end user really think that it's just a matter of connecting, adding few data, and just starting the ordering, especially if at the end you have a transactional system linked to it, which makes the things more complex because you have a lot of compliance and check and security related to it. So there's a myth that everything is easy and you actually buy it and plug it on your system, but it's definitely not like that. And every case is specific, and our ecosystem are changing so fast. Sometimes when you just change your cloud provider, it could have a big impact on whatever you use or don't use. So that's also all these elements are really a challenge, because you need to be up to date to whatever is happening outside, but also inside your own company if you want to have it efficient and go faster into your validation and implementation.
Yeah, you mentioned also, the complexity that as a project manager you have to manage about, people, organization, but you mentioned also suppliers, that you have to manage all this in order to be successful.
Yes, indeed. So it's true that, but it's what it's challenge in procurement, but what I think we love is that you have a lot of different persona, and so you have to deal with your internal user, your procurement stakeholders. It could be also, if you talk about transactional, some more topics related to finance or even HR sometimes. But at the end, a lot of platform application you put in place are for your suppliers that may have their own solution, may be interested to integrate or not, or use your application. And depending on the size and the strategic connection you have with them, it might be easy or not to move some applications, some transformation, some new process. And yeah, it makes it really complex. And I think it's linked to a comment made before, is that the procurement marketplace really doesn't exist. There are a lot of protocol and not really standardization of way to work in the different industry. So you have to navigate around all these elements in order to find your what's work best for you. But sometimes it might work for you, but not for your supplier. So you have to find the right balance.
Yeah, thank you. Thomas, you wanted to add something to what Boris just said?
Yes, I can give some additional elements. My experience recently is that we get a lot of calls through LinkedIn and through the emails on from prospects who wants to sell some kind of service, right? There are many coming in. So first, how to create a filter of what is relevant and what is not. So a simple practical solution is one of the team members is to make them in charge of who is the filter of all those calls that we get. Some of them are very justified and others are not, and give some kind of classification either by subject or by size or by level of maturity, because this can give a trend, and then later on that can become a discussion point of saying, where do you want to entertain some prospect discussions? So I think that's the first, criteria I will give. What a filter that fits your own need. There's no need to hire a consultant for that. Just because each company runs according to different operating modes and financial criteria. I think that's the first filter. The second thing I think after that is that what I learned the hard way is that I would probably recommend to have almost a prototype data, because the first thing the company will say, oh, give me your data, and you will see it's very easy. And then I send that back to you, and then you will be amazed to see. Or they come in with all those demos are very fancy. It's very rare that at least I really understand what it shows, because it jumps from one screen to the other. It shows you fancy graphs, but you don't really know how that correlates of what you need. So if you have a small data points that you collected from different sources of information, and you give them that prototype, and you say, okay, convert that prototype in something that you can show me, at least you save yourself a lot of back and forth. That's certainly a good learning. And then from here, you can create, if you're still interested, a small proof of concept. But here you have to be careful, right? Because as soon as you go with the technology companies and the proof of concept, there is an expectation of the deal will be made. And the legal aspects out of that can be challenging because you're not really committing yet. And the part that most companies mistakes make is that how do you project manage that from the internally and from the other side, which then goes into the famous SOW, service of work. Most companies give then X hours to do configuration and implementation, but the truth is that it's like a credit card that you lose very quickly, and then they try to get you on an SOW in, and that's really when the money starts to flow out. I think that most companies largely underestimate that part. It's a little bit like the printer and the ink, right? The printer is cheap, but the ink that you have to put in can get very costly. So that's a little bit those steps that I have learned recently.
Yeah, thank you, James.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there is no way to raise our hand.
No, you can't. No, so just jump. You're here. Just go ahead.
So I just jumped in when there was a silence. I kind of
yes, I saw that. Go.
So when in your question there is how to have a successful digital procurement initiative, and one dimension I think we should not underestimate is the change management dimension, and the resistance to change that you can have from actually the stakeholders of the initiative, because as you pointed out a few minutes ago, I think I don't remember exactly who said that. I think that was Thomas. This should save time. Besides all the additional information on the analytics, before having more robust processes, before the compliance and so on top of, not before. But this should provide efficiency gains, kind of automate repetitive tasks, take care of things that today we're taking a lot of time for the negotiations or these kind of things. And what do you do with your free time? Do you move up in the chain as a true business partner because you have more time, and then you can be more involved with the business and impacting the sourcing strategy or these kind of things? Or do you kind of lock in the efficiency gains, and that's your business case, and then there is a risk that you reduce the size of the teams, and as a consequence, the teams might not be super happy to see a new digital initiative coming in if they fear that downsizing might be coming next. That's, to me, that's a real question that has to be addressed carefully.
Yes, for sure. I think that Yeah, I mean, there are several theories around that, right? So you have the theory that it's streamlining the organizations, or you keep the resources you have and you build them up for more interesting and value-add activities. Obviously, I would prefer the second one than the first one.
Me too.
But it does challenge the skill sets of the team members. So I think when you say the change management, yes, you're right. The change management it's never easy. Unfortunately for us who are in this world of transformation and change management, very often you're the fuse. Either you go too fast or you go too slow, you didn't explain enough, you were not clear enough. So there's a lot going around that. But I think it has become better. And then comes the difficulty is how much are the team members who are in the previous job, so to speak, before the digitalization, really willing to invest in themselves to learn and develop themselves. Because there's only so much you can do as a company as long as the employee is willing to go to the next yeah, there's learning that, and it takes time and it's personal time. I think that's bottom line.
Thank you. So before you mentioned the work to be done well, and with those small digital solutions that are calling you, and that you have to filter that out. But what are those specialized digital solutions bringing to the clients? What are the answers that they can bring you? James, can you give us a sense of what they bring to the table as opposed to what you call the classic legacy suites?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think there are two different buckets to this. You can look at sort of best of breed solutions and say, okay, what does a specialist contract lifecycle management platform give me over and above the contracts module that's in one of the suites, or what does a specialist spend analytics platform give me over and above one of the modules that's in one of the suites? But there's another angle to this, and I know we're gonna touch on consulting a little bit later as a specific niche, but I wanted to give a couple of other examples. So the one that I've personally got experience in is sourcing freight and logistics. And if you try and run a road transport tender or a parcels tender or an air freight or ocean freight tender in one of these legacy suite platforms, you're going to pretty quickly discover that the functionality of those e-auction or sourcing modules is very, very limited, because it's so complex as a category. You know, you're not buying meal trays for an airline, or you're not buying steel for an automotive supplier. It's a very, very complex service that you're buying if you're buying logistics. So there are so many nuances that go into the pricing that, having used the specialist platform to buy ocean freight and air freight and road freight, and having also tried to do it in SAP Ariba, and I'm not saying Ariba is any better or worse than any of the other suites out there for this, it's like night and day when you compare them. And you can apply the same logic to, I mean, there are platforms out there that specialize in print and promotional items, for example, which is also something that's typically managed by a marketing assistant rather than procurement often, and it's a huge savings opportunity if it's done properly. There are solutions out there that can do travel and expenses. There are solutions out there that manage MRO, which is another one that I've spent a lot of time pulling my hair out over the years with. So there are a lot of niche category specific solutions out there that are growing to serve the increasing conclusion that procurement professionals are drawing, that the sourcing modules in these big suites are quite generic, and they might be okay for buying relatively commoditized items, but for anything where the devil is in the detail, they're often not fit for function. And I think, you know, if we're segueing onto consulting or any complex professional service for that matter, it's a fantastic example.
Yeah, thank you. there was another example that you mentioned, Thomas, when we were discussing. You said that some themes can only be addressed with technology. I think that goes into also the kind of answer those specialized solutions can bring to their clients.
Yeah, and the example we were speaking about, is sustainability. It is one of those new subjects. Yeah, you can reach out to your hundreds of suppliers and ask them, oh, how much emission control have you reduced? How will you get there? It's clearly an area where there's no predefined standard. Everybody does more or less what they have. It depends also on the size of the company. There are some platforms that are starting to emerge. I know at least about 10 platforms now that claim that they're the unique one. And it's almost impossible if you send a letter, you put it in Excel, or even if you have a little bit of a data collector, a little bit smarter. So the digitalization path is necessary to collect certain number of information through the digitalization approach. Yes, it does go now back to the initial debate on reaching platforms, but in general, it's more like a data platform. And it's an early journey, right? It's an early journey. You learn on the go. There are quite some companies lately who have developed very sophisticated algorithms, but they don't really have any clients yet. So you're saying, okay, do I do it? I am the first one. You know that you will pay to develop their platforms. Maybe it's worth it because you don't have anything else. That's where the partnership comes into play or not. And then from there, the only, in most cases, somebody has to enter the data in. So you're calling your suppliers and it's okay, please keyboard those information in so that after that I can get an aggregated view with the algorithm, which is the next level of limitation, right? So every time you push one level further down, you hit the next brick wall. But that's the journey that we are in. But I do believe that more and more activities will come with specialized. And just to finish on that is that, for example, in our organization, right, I have reached the limit of the analytics than a P2P or any normal traditional procurement solution can deliver, because if you really want to know what you buy, it's not a category tree. If you really want to know what you buy, you have almost to go into this scanning OCR, reading text of documents, and then from there on define, because I cannot say what is my average license fees of software depending on what I buy. I just can't, right? Or here consulting, right? What is my daily rate of consultants by type of consulting that we pay, or depending on where they are. So we are so constrained at the end of the day by the main principles of accounts payable, if you want, the PO and an invoice, that anything else the digitalization will permit to do. Unfortunately, my observation is that when you see all those very sophisticated solutions that exist on the consumer rating, on the revenue management side, it's a little bit sad to see that they have not migrated yet to the supplier. So I think that for those that are really into the digitalization, you're better off to look outside procurement and bring it back to the supplier world, because you will be very quickly limited to basic accounts payable. Where's my purchase order? What is written on it? And what's the invoice? And that's it. After that, you don't have much information. So the specialization will come for sure.
All right.
But the data sources will come from somewhere else.
So yes, and we're going to talk about as one category in particular, which is consulting. Laurent, could you tell us a little bit specifically in that consulting category landscape? What are the solutions that are there, the answers that are already available for clients?
So at the end, it comes down to what you want to do. And for instance, I've met with several clients that today are using their source to contract or source to pay platform, such as the platforms that everybody knows, like Zicus, like Jagger, like GEP, like Evalua, even the Ariba system, to manage their purchase. And they have in there some sourcing capabilities, and it's good enough for what they want to do, especially if they have small volumes. If you just want to manage the process, a lot of companies are doing it this way, especially as this is a category that has been a bit deserted for many, many years. The first premises we saw were the emergence of I would say the contingent workforce management, which is not exactly what we would define, you and I, as management consulting, but you have several solutions to manage external workforce that are pretty good and that are there for many, many years, such as SAP Fieldglass, such as Beeline, such as Pro Unlimited. You know, those platforms are good if you want to manage your workforce. They have some modules to manage statement of work. Here, we can see rather fast that it's not exactly the core of the activity, but it exists. So they present themselves as a contingent workforce management plus services procurement. I will come back to that. The other thing in terms of digitalization that we have seen, and it echoes a little bit what Thomas was saying earlier, is that you have more and more. Last time we inventoried that with Helene, we had more than 100 marketplaces for consulting services, and those marketplaces are there that are very good for, I would say, spot contracts when you're looking for independent consultants. So I'm thinking about the Catalant, the Comatch, these kind of platforms that you have if you want to buy, I would say, a rather defined and small work package. Those are go-to platform. Also, a lot of users are using that because it's super flexible and super fast, and they don't have to go through a cumbersome process that would be internal and that would be part of the tail with the creation of the supplier and the onboarding of the supplier and all the complexity that you have when you are in the tail. Indeed, by using those platforms that are at the same time consulting and interim management, they find quick, I would say solutions. You have some solutions that have emerged that are on services procurement. They tend to be rather large and embrace complex categories, which includes consulting, but also legal, marketing, and so on. I'm thinking about things like Globality, that has a pretty large marketing budget, so that probably you have met at least once if you have participated to some events. You can think about Padua and Mercanis that are shown on the site from James. You can think about Zivio also, that has an interesting concept. And those categories are about services in general, not necessarily focused on consulting, but they address the consulting pretty nicely. They tend to expand. Sometimes some of those platforms are also expanding to other categories of indirect. I don't know if this is a push from the investors that have invested in those startups that are trying to expand the pie, to expand the amount of revenues under management, and then times a multiple, it increases the valuation, or if it's a real strategic move from a pure category specialist. Of course, I find that questionable because I prefer the specialization to the generalist nature. Because if you take a platform that is dedicated to services and then you expand to indirect, then where is the border between what you do and what an evaluator is doing? And then you don't know if you are a niche, kind of a specialized application, or if you are indeed the traditional source to pay layer. But those are the solutions that we have seen. The one thing that we have not seen, and that's why we launched Consource, is it's very rare to find a platform that's addressing the complete needs to manage the category. So to start with the demand and the connection with the strategy to make sure you spend on the right projects, to check that you are spending with the right setup and make sure that you're using consultants when you should use consultants, but also internal resources when you should use internal resources, to have a strong spend management layer to understand where you are allocating your resources as compared to your strategy. Are you, again, looking at the right projects? Do you have your category management that is in there? Do you have your supplier relationship management that is in there? The all-in-one platform focused on the category, that's what we are trying to achieve. That would be a little bit my conclusion. You have a lot of offering on the sourcing part, and some very elaborated sourcing possibilities with AI included to help you write. It's trendy these days to help you write your request for proposal and so on. That's what I would say. James, you're specialized in this as well. So what do you concur with that I'm saying, or you see things differently?
Yeah, I think I would concur. Yeah, there are, as you say, there are a lot that are more focused on sourcing rather than sort of total life cycle management. And I think especially on services, the sourcing is just the start, really, isn't it? It's being able to manage what you're being invoiced and signing off the value and monitoring the cost to make sure that there is not creep in terms of what you're spending. There's a company in Switzerland called True Ledger, which is an interesting one. They have a smart contract solution that helps you to manage your services contracts at the point of work delivery, so as you can clip any project creep or overspend before the invoice lands on accounts payables desk. And I think that's a really interesting concept, because oftentimes services procurement, yes, what's in the contract is important, but it's often theoretical, because what happens at site level and at project level is often very different to what's been agreed in the contract. So I do think that monitoring downstream, there's perhaps quite a lot of potential to have platforms develop that can do that, because like you say, Laurent, there's a lot of it is focused on sourcing and supplier selection.
That's very intriguing. I wrote a piece a couple of years ago. I think it was part of our initial book, Helene, about why I thought that smart contracts were not about to be applied in consulting for a while, because it was so difficult to tie the materialization of the contract with concrete deliverables that I was not seeing a bright future for it. But interesting. I will check the True Ledger concept, because I'm okay to be wrong at times. That's fine. The other piece I see that is missing in a lot of items is there is no, I would say, standard for the measure of performance in consulting, and it's very rare for companies to actually measure the return on investment on their project. And that's something that we have tried to do, because to me it's absolutely critical, especially when you have sizable volumes of consulting, but also if you can share that with the community. There is no platform that does what you can find with a G2 or with a Gartner, that gives you insights on what are the clients actually saying about those consulting firms, and how can you have trust with tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers if you don't have kind of visibility on concretely what have they written, what are they thinking, what's their strong point, and what are their former clients saying. And today, this platform, we have tried to work on this, and we have a baby in gestation, I would say. But this is something that is a missing element in the chain for consulting procurement, in my view.
Yeah, so if I may just add a little bit on this, is that if I take it from the more traditional procurement lead perspective now, I would love to have be able to connect on a consulting platform where there are pre-registered suppliers that have relatively simplified, so it will avoid me to go through this whole supply onboarding and terms and conditions. Because you see, on the practical side, if I get a call from any leader and it says, okay, I need a project team that starts in 10 days, can you make that happen? And they have to start one in Europe and one in the US with 2 different teams. I'm totally unable to do it.
Yeah,
it will just not happen. Because, and then if in addition to that, those consultants, and I'm not talking about contractors now, right? I'm really talking consulting. If they have to have data access, and on the top of that, there's email exchanges, it means that you have to run it through the information security, you have to run it through the privacy. In best case, you will maybe start in 5-6 weeks.
Yep.
And then what's happening is that the consulting firm says, yeah, it's very urgent. The budget owner says, well, make them start to work without any documents. It's very unhealthy, right? So from that, now the second aspect that I would love to have is that we really struggle on what are all those fees, and I'm not even saying from the procurement bidding perspective. I'm just saying, just to understand, a big firm can charge 200,000 a week, right? And a very little self-employed consultant will maybe charge 5,000 a week, right? So you have from 5,000 to 200,000 a week, and when to use what, for what purpose, what payback. It's so difficult to get out of that, except executives having personalized relationship with the partners, and then the deals get cut. I understand that part, but if you take it more from a rational perspective, that view is very limited. And the last point is that yeah, you spoke about a smart contract and smart. I'm wondering if in this time we live in 2023, with what we have access, if the next breakthrough for those type of data is not the OCR, right? The text reading of documents, and then from here get data out, and hopefully the algorithm after that can clean them. I must admit that we start to have limited options that are viable from the cost perspective, viable from the technologies that truly exist, and something that you can roll out in the next 6-9 months if you make the decision today. And maybe those old technologies have to come back and get mixed with algorithms.
All right. So I will cut you, Laurent. I'm sorry, we're just running out of time, and there are a few questions that were asked, and I'd like you to answer that. So a first question from Simon was, you seem to be pretty clear about the limitation of the more mature S2P suites, but what do you say about companies who have not adopted any of those and are starting out their journey with just the RP, e.g. S4? So who want to have a try at answering that question?
Yeah, I can take that one, Helene, and be quite brief. So I think, Simon, what I would recommend to you is start with the end in mind. What's your end goal? What's your North Star? Is it to improve the user experience of your stakeholders, or to make it easier to onboard your suppliers? Is it to cut down on the amount of busy work that your category managers are doing? I think if you start to ask those questions and come up with a North Star or an end goal, that will guide you down the path. So if you've just started out your journey with just the ERP, so SAP S/4HANA, SAP now has a marketplace, so you can attach or bolt on best of breed solutions to your SAP. So if you want to just bolt on something that has a mobile app first, user friendly front end to do your P2P, instead of giving your stakeholders something clunky like Ariba, then that might be something that gets you part of the way there, depending on what your objectives are.
Okay, thank you. You want to add something, Thomas or Boris? No.
I would just say very simple for time management purposes that if at the end of the day you need some kind of P2P, because you need to get your purchase order out, you need to pay your invoice. So this is the minimum requirement, and you need to cover that base, right? It's from a strict controlling perspective, and once you have that, you can go to the next base, and yes, there are quite some solutions that are not too expensive, that brings you into the spend visibility. So I would say P2P check and control, spend management, and then you go to the third level once you reach that level.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Thomas and James' comments. Like, it's great if you can start from a white page, because you can a little bit decide what you want. But yeah, I guess definitely the basic ERP would help. And after, if you can plug the specialized application, best of breed, and what is really your your first target will, yeah, I think is a great journey that you can start with. So all the best.
Thank you. So a question from Don. The group touched briefly on the cost-benefit analysis to justify the digital procurement. Can the team give some real example of hard-saving taps to support the use of digital procurement packages?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on the mindset of your CFO. That's the first thing. If you have a CFO who wants the hard dollar money, you always end up in cost reduction of your categories, right? I mean, so you see the spend and then you bid out the spend and then hopefully you get costs down. I mean, that's the bottom line. But then you have the next level, right? Then you go into the old-fashioned total cost of ownership, and the total cost of ownership is the value add. And there is, I think there is no simple formula. That would be great. Maybe somebody will patent that one day. But the formula really says is that where do you believe that your suppliers can add value, and is this value recognized in whatever the company does? But there is, I think, a culture aspect to it on how financials are turned into value add that are allowed to be used in an ROI calculation. Probably not answering exactly what you want to hear, but it's a little bit the reality.
If I can jump in here on the examples on the consulting category, what we explain and we have built discussing with our customers. The first one, implementing a solution for managing the full category for consulting. If you implement some proper demand management, you can probably shave 15% of the projects that you have in your portfolio. Just to give you an example, a company that we are working with currently has acquired 8 times the same project during COVID because everyone was concerned with the future of work and the business units were all buying the same project and there was no central visibility on what was being done. And they realized just at the end that they had bought from various consultancies several times the same project. So this is a very hard, simple saving. Then organizing proper and relevant competitions and mixing tier 1 and tier 2 in most of the projects, maybe not some that require a pure tier 1 because you want a brand, but if you can diversify, will generate also some competitive pressure and will probably drive costs down. And the last one is that if you automate and you kind of simplify things, then you have definitely an efficiency saving that is not necessarily leading to a downsizing, but then you can repurpose and either provide more quality time to your stakeholders or spend more time on other categories. And that's also savings that enter into the business case.
Thank you. So our last question from Andre, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. How about SRM tool usage? Any example of those being helpful in the consulting category? So that's a tough one. James, maybe you want to have a try on this one?
It's a really tough one. And the reason why it's tough is I've never purchased complex professional services in my life as a category manager. I've always sort of worked in sort of manufacturing related categories. So it's really tough for me to answer that. I mean, certain things, I mean, if you're looking at supplier, I mean, the R is important, right? If you're looking at supplier relationship management rather than just supplier audit and control and compliance, then theoretically most supplier relationship management software solutions should be able to give you value if you're managing services categories. But I think inevitably a lot of SRM tools tend to be focused more on manufacturing businesses rather than service categories or service businesses. So I do sort of empathize with André that it's a tough question. Zivio is probably the closest one that I've seen that does that in some way for complex professional services.
Yeah, and as a consultant, I've almost never seen a proper SRM system that was managing the relationship. Also, because there was no standard for measuring the performance of the consultants. So the procurement folks that should have been leading the SRM didn't really know what to say. They were sending an email before the meeting with them to a couple of people saying, hey, you've bought a project from this guy. Did you like what they did? But it was so poor in terms of information that the meetings were mostly meetings to discuss the end of year rebate than meetings to actually manage the performance.
Well, that's it. Thank you to all. Thank you for to Thomas, James, Boris, and Laurent for that their insights into digital procurement. I hope you enjoy the webinar. You will receive after it's finished and processed the video of that webinar in your. You will receive the link in your mailbox, and we'll also publish that on our YouTube channel. So stay tuned. And thank you to all. Have a good end of your day, wherever you are in your day. And see you soon then. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Helene, Laurent, thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, Boris.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Going now.
Start moving, yeah.